Hi, Eve. Welcome back to the show.
So good to be here, and I feel so honored to be back.
Well, you are our first repeat guest.
Yay.
I'm so excited that it's you who's back with us because I knew almost nothing about you when we first talked, and we came to find out that we have such a shared history of our backgrounds. So it's so wonderful to see also how successful Fair Play has been, even just since we talked. And we only talked a few months ago. And Fair Play is just, I feel like it's everywhere. How are things going?
I totally appreciate you saying that. I think, the sad part of, I think, the success of the Fair Play messages is that women's unpaid labor during the pandemic increased by 153%. On average. And I think we're just don't want to take it anymore. We finally are angry and fed up enough that we want to do something about it in our homes and in society. We see care now on the agenda with the White House.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of fair play as a political movement. It's always been a personal movement to recognize the unfairness of building societies on the backs of the unpaid labor of women and the undervalued labor of women of color.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now watching other people, even today, there was an article in Harvard Business Review that said for women to thrive in the workforce, men need to do more at home.
Mm-hmm.
As if somehow that's a Harvard Business Review big idea. I think women will say that that's something that we've known for over 100 years, but I'm glad that the conversation is picking up steam.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned before that unpaid labor for women has increased 153% since the pandemic started. What kind of impact is that having on women in terms of their mental health?
That's a great question. I think so much of the focus has been on women as a commodity, where we look at women as workers, our roles first. So our roles as mothers, our roles as homeschoolers, our roles as providers. And we know, and the attention has been on the dramatic decrease of women in the workplace. We know that women have been forced out over the past year in record droves. I'll use the word droves, right? We're at millions, 3 million if you count active workers, over 5 million if you look at other numbers, if you count in people who have even stopped looking. And so that not only just takes a toll, obviously, financially, and you can imagine the hardship of what single mothers are going through. My mother was a single mother, and I feel for women who have to weather this storm alone, with very little social safety nets. And so, but I think all women, regardless of our socioeconomic status and our lived experience, have expressed to me all over this country. And actually, I've gone out and I've had 17 countries, women and men in 17 countries I've spoken with during the pandemic. And it's happening everywhere. We are the number one word that I've asked for women, especially, to associate with the pandemic. When I ask them to think about their home life, number one word that has come out of my word cloud has been drowning.
Wow.
Drowning.
Wow. What does that do to your mental health if every day, your overall feeling is drowning?
Well, we know that women are diagnosed with anxiety disorders before even the pandemic, twice as much as men. We know that, and especially in my research, what I found in my interviews was that if women identified as holding more than 65 cards, and we will get to dig in today about the household cards of fair play are. And for those who don't know fair play is a metaphor. It is a system that breaks up the shit we do into 100 cards that have about 20 conception, planning, and execution items for each card. And the goal of each card is when you hold it with a full ownership mindset. But of those tasks, of those 100 cards, when women, and this again was before the pandemic, when women in hetero cisgender relationships identified as being a co-breadwinner or primary breadwinner, so that is in over a majority of our households, we are co-breadwinners. And a woman also identified as holding more than 65 of the 100 fair play cards. Every single one of them in my interview set had a physical disorder. And what I mean by that, every single one of those women that identified with being a co-breadwinner and holding over a majority, a super majority for what they were doing in the home had some version of a physical manifestation of stress. And so the most common in my interview set, and now I have thousands of data points. Back then it was 250 dedicated beta testers that I was following. But now, of course, my data set has grown. Yeah. It manifested as insomnia as most common. But the second was the words I'd never even heard before, like Hashimoto's disease, lupus. These are things that I was not so familiar with. But what I find out is that they all have something in common, which is that the body literally starts attacking itself. And that's what an autoimmune disease is. Yeah. And so that is before the pandemic. And so now we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing an increase in anxiety disorders, an increase in Japan. There's some terrible studies around suicide. Wow. We are not thriving. Women are not thriving. And I will not stop. I will not rest, ironically, until we as a society recognize the moral failure by building society, by having women as the caregivers, the default social safety net for America. Yeah. So that's why I consider this an emergency. It's a moral failing, but it's also a global emergency.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about what fair play is. So for those people who are listening in and hearing about fair play for the first time, can you talk a little bit about what the fair play system is and how it came to be?
Great question. So I actually had my own mental breakdown in my home, and that's where the story starts. It starts with my husband, Seth, sending me a text that you're very familiar with now, but it was a text that, just said, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries." And that was a day where my mental health was extremely challenged because I'm getting this text from Seth, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries." For me, it was getting this text as I was already texting and driving. It was being punched in the chest from feeling like I was failing at being the fulfiller of my husband's smoothie needs. And so what happened that day was when I got this text, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries," I pulled over because I started to sob. Around me was a breast pump and a diaper bag on the passenger seat of my car. I had gifts for a newborn baby to return that I hadn't yet in the back seat of my car. I had a client contract on my lap because I'm a lawyer and a mediator by trade. And I'd been forced out of the traditional workforce. I don't say opted out anymore. I say forced out because I think it's a better, more accurate way to describe what's happening to women. Yes. So I had a client contract in my lap that I was trying to mark up. I had a pen between my legs that was stabbing me in the vagina every time I would hit the brakes. As I was racing to get Zach from my older son, who was 3 at the time, from his toddler transition program. In America, right, those programs are entire salaries and they are 7 minutes because we really value childcare. Yes. I'm being sarcastic there. And that's the chaos of what was happening to me during when I get this, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries" text.
Right.
So why was I sobbing on the side of the road? I was sobbing because for the unfairness, for the lack of the identity that I knew I could have been, for the promise of the marriage, the equal marriage that I thought I was going to build. I was sobbing for the fact that I was the default, or as I call now in Fair Play, the she-fault, for literally every single household and domestic task and childcare task for my family.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to honor that is where this journey started 10 years ago. And yes, I have things much in a better state, 10 years later. But for those who are listening, who may still be in that state of feeling like they're drowning, of not feeling stuck, I do want to honor that we are unlearning here today together.
Yeah.
And that's part of the beauty of this, is that it doesn't have to happen overnight. Right. But I do hope that we will all honor that this is the 101, that something we're talking about today took me 10 years to rectify in my own marriage. So we should give ourselves grace that these concepts today are new. And anybody who feels, again, like they're still drowning, we see you and we're here for you.
So you have this moment where your husband asks you about the blueberries for his smoothie. You then embark on putting a list together of all the things that you do in a given day, in a given week, in a given month, whatever, for the family. And you start sharing it around with other people, right? Like,
yes,
hey,
like you, women just like you.
Yes, let's add to this list. And you then decide, okay, wow, this is not just me. There's like a lot of women that are in the same boat here, where we're taking on. So can you give first, so people understand, they can wrap their heads around it, what are some examples of what was on that list?
So like any type A person, I think we all think things can be solved with a list. So I started with a list. I know so many other women start with a list. Didn't end with a list. We'll talk about why lists don't work alone. But it did start with the should I do spreadsheet. And I will say what it did work for was, again, it connected me with women like you. It connected me with a community of women over 9 months. And remember, this is 10 years ago.
Right.
So we have to remember back that we were just in the beginning of like mom bloggers, social media. There was, I don't even think I had an iPad back then, right? I think I still had my BlackBerry, right? It was, technologies move so fast, but there weren't these concepts being spoken about. So we were sort of still suffering in silence. And so this 9 months of sourcing the should I do spreadsheet, where I had read, I try to get my hands on almost every single book around the gendered division of labor, which I learned had a name, right? I found out the she-fault has a name. So that was the first light bulb. Okay, other people have talked about this. They've called it emotional labor. They've called it the second shift. They've called it the mental load. But my favorite term was invisible work.
Yes.
And that was coined in 1986 by a sociologist named Arlene Kaplan Daniels. And I loved it because she argues that work in the home is always going to be invisible because it's done by women. It'll never be valued. It'll never be in the GDP. And that's intentional. So because it was so beautifully stated, I kept thinking to myself, well, and this was a little naive then, right? That, well, if I just make it visible, then Seth will see all I do and it'll change the dynamic in my house. So that's what the should I do spreadsheet was intended to do. It was intended to make the invisible visible. And what was on there were things like making school lunches. And I put in parentheses, 15 minutes. I put in, attending dentist appointments. That was 1 hour. And then it started to grow. And this was the fun part. So it was sort of being spread around, not the way things go viral today on like TikTok, but it was going amongst communities of women who were forwarding it to each other. And so I was getting, they saw the email chain from the bottom email. Oh, you're the originator of the spreadsheet. And Eve, I want to have you add Elf on the Shelf. I don't see Elf on the Shelf here. And then I'd have to say, well, actually, if you just push the right arrow to tab 72, that's Magical Beings. And if you scroll down to item 16, you'll see Elf on the Shelf. Yes. Yep. It's right there under Lucky Leprechaun. Yes. And right above Santa. Yes. So And then, it would be things like, oh, Eve, I don't see sunscreen on here. And then I'd be like, well, just go to tab 18. That's medical and healthy living. You just have to scroll down to item 42. You'll see application of sunscreen there.
Yeah.
And so it was that. It was that granular. Mm-hmm. It was, to me, one of the best things I ever did in my life. But, I finally get the courage to send it off to Seth, right? This 19 million megabyte spreadsheet with the subject line, "Can't wait to discuss." And
I'm sure he reacted quite well to that.
Exactly. It was all of the mediation and communication training I'd been given. I really, let's just say I discarded all of that in service of my home. And I sent off the spreadsheet with no context. And just like, and probably how I in the back of my mind probably was resigned to expect. Seth didn't even, I did not get obviously the response I wanted. I didn't even get words. I got just a monkey emoji covering its eyes. The see no evil. That was it. So that was
right. That's a good use of that emoji.
It was a good use of that emoji. It felt really sad at the time because it was the time, another really sad moment where I recognized that lists alone don't work. And I had to make a really big choice at that point in my life, which was to continue to lose myself and my identity and become a gray version, an anxious gray version of Eve, of who I used to be, or I could get my ass in gear and become my own client. Because what I really realized was that while lists alone don't work, I know something that does.
Yeah.
And that's systems.
Yeah.
And I build systems for a living. That's what I do. That's lawyers. We become lawyers because actually, spoiler alert, we're probably the best in behavior design in the world because we design the behaviors that everybody else has to follow, right? That's what laws are.
Yeah.
And so I know how to design behaviors. I'm trained in systems management on top of the orientation of being a lawyer. And so it was easy for me to start thinking of my home as my most important organization. And that's when I asked that question, the number one question that changed my life, which was, what if we treat our homes as our most important organizations?
Yeah. So talk about how the cards relate to fair play and what the system is.
I'm so excited because since we did one episode already, we get to sort of dig into what I don't always get to do actually in episodes. And that's really to dig deep into the system, to the mental health aspects of fair play and why this one change that's not rocket science is revolutionary.
Yeah.
And I want to just say the power of a mindset change is, you may see it with your kids because Carol Dweck, she came up with something called the growth mindset, the power of yet. And I know that my son has this Post-it note that says yet on his computer, and all kids in America now, I think, are learning about the growth mindset that you say, I'm not a good soccer player yet. And so that mindset shift is similar to fair play. It is about looking at the home in a completely different way. And the way you do that is the second most important question I asked in 10 years, which is, and this is the question I also asked in 17 countries, how did mustard get in your refrigerator? It is revolutionary, the answer, because this is the key to mental health. And we'll talk about how. So what I would hear in 17 countries and why I love that question so much is condiments are universal.
Right.
Apparently condiments are universal. And I couldn't find a country that did not have beloved condiments. So if it wasn't mustard, it was something else.
Right.
But the question was, how did mustard get in your refrigerator? And so let's center the problem, which is the hetero cisgender couples in these countries. It was overwhelmingly the same answer. So much so that my good friend, Professor Pam Stone, who's a sociologist, said, Eve, you've reached your saturation point. You know your answer. You don't need to keep interviewing. And I said, but I love to interview. It's like one of my favorite things to do. So what I would hear is my second son, Johnny, likes French's yellow mustard on his protein. That's why we have it in the refrigerator. He will choke on dry chicken. He douses in protein. He eats his protein. Mm-hmm. So that's in organizational management, what we call conception. Mm-hmm. I know that phase of organizational management. Then I would hear, oh yeah, and then I monitor the mustard for when it's running low, and I get stakeholder buy-in from everybody else in my house for what they need for the week. Mm-hmm. They didn't actually say stakeholder buy-in, but that's how I hear it. Right. And that's planning. Mm-hmm. And then I hear, oh yeah, and then my husband Jeff, he goes to the store for the French's yellow mustard, and he brings home spicy Dijon every fucking time. And Eve, you want me to trust him with my living will or my memories and photos or any other of your fair play cards? No way. The dude can't even bring home the right type of mustard. So that because it was so prevalent, led me to realize that the things I'm brought in, I'm paid the big bucks for family foundations and family businesses, is exactly the same thing I could write about and start working on and helping people take agency in their own home. Yeah. And that is the complete, I am brought in to organizations, not when they're functioning really well. I wish it was that way. But again, like the HBO show Succession, I'm brought into organizations when they've lost the two most important things that organizations need. Mm-hmm. And that is accountability and trust. Yeah. And so once I recognized that accountability and trust was being lost in the home as well, I realized that the ownership mindset of holding conception, planning, and execution together. Yep. The same way we do it in the workplace. So you just talked to me about your team earlier, right? Yeah. We said you have the best team. I know if I came into your office and said, hey, what should I be doing today? I'm just going to wait here until you tell me what to do. Mm-hmm. I know I wouldn't be on the She Speaks team. I just know it. And so it is not the way we do things anywhere else. Even my Aunt Marian's Mahjong group has more clearly defined expectations in the home. You don't bring snack twice to the group, you're out. But the home, I know what it looks like today. It does not look like our most important organization. We're deciding who's setting the table when we're hangry and we're cranky. We are deciding who's taking the dog out for their walk when it's about to take a piss on the rug. And that's the mental health aspect. Yes. That we are drowning. I said we are drowning before, but I didn't say what we are drowning in. Right. We are drowning in decision fatigue. Yes. Women are drowning in decision fatigue. I had so many women say to me, if I have to make one more damn decision, I am going to drop. I am going to drop out of my household, out of my life. I can't make another decision. Yeah. And so the only way to rectify that is to take the cognitive labor, which is the conception and planning, and to have men do it. Yeah. We need a less encumbered mind. Virginia Woolf 100 years ago said women could never be Shakespeare because we do not have unencumbered minds. I'm not asking for a fully unencumbered mind, but what I am asking is that mental health is my favorite quote, right? One of my favorite quotes, Vivian Green, right? Life is not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Yep. I'm not asking for the storm to pass. I'm just saying that we can't drown in the rain. Yeah. We need to learn to dance in the rain. And part of that is addressing the mental health aspects of having the cognitive labor fall all on us. Yeah. And that is the key. The ownership mindset is key to how we can start changing that dynamic. And that is really what the fair play system is. It's not rocket science. Right. Once you hold a card, you hold it with full ownership. That's it. Yeah. Easier and so an example of a card is what? Give us one example of a card. So there's 100 cards you can choose from. Hopefully you're not holding all 100. There are some like job loss and death. Those are the wild cards that hopefully you're not dealing with. But if you are, then of course life is going to have extreme challenges, more mental health issues. But at the time of our first discussion about fair play, I was holding, and they weren't cards back then, right? They were tasks, and then it turned into a gamified. The gamification makes it really fun. It makes it easier to have difficult conversations, to say, hey, let's look at this card deck together. Let's see what's in our deck and who wants to own what. It is easier said than done. But what I will say is that the beauty of it is that that it can start with one card. So as you said to me, so when I was holding it was about 87 cards from my family when I started the game.
Wow.
I wanted to just have Seth take on one. I wanted to still hold 86 and have him hold one. And I know that sounds really strange now. It sounds strange to me now, but you have to start where you are. So for that, I said one card, extracurricular sports. I said, I love you. Bless your heart, Seth. Thank you for saying that you're in charge of extracurricular sports, for showing up to the Little League field. But here's what it would mean for you to own that card. It would mean that the conception, that you'd be surveying our kids for what they want to play, what friends they want to play with. Right. It would be you researching what leagues are open to us and available to us. And then the planning comes. So I will have you will go on an 85-person text chain over how to carpool our kids to practice. You will figure out how to get a coach's gift. You will be snack dad. You will apply sunscreen and protective gear. And also, oh yeah, of course. And when the cleats come and they're not the right size, you're going to be returning those to Amazon. Right. So that's extracurricular sports. That's the conception and planning and execution. Right. And so for us, and it took time and communication, and that's what I read about in Fair Play, the journey. But once we got there, once Seth understood that was the ownership mindset for extracurricular sports, not only did it freed 6 hours of my week up, but it allowed him this freedom to have this beautiful relationship that he still has to this day, years later, with my two sons over their collective love of sports, watching and playing. I think the beauty of the Fair Play system is I'm not telling you how to live your life. I'm just asking you to ask the right questions about your life. And when you do that, you can customize the system for whatever works for your family. But I am here to tell you that being a stay-at-home parent, a caregiver, somebody who does all the childcare and domestic work for your family, it is unsustainable from a mental health perspective for one person to hold all the cards. And I'm speaking to single mothers, especially, who have borne the brunt of this pandemic. It is unsustainable for you to hold all the cards. We need grace. We need grace. We need community. We need a village. And so it will never be 50-50 in that. I think that's the wrong equation. I don't even care what 50-50 looks like, because sometimes it'll be 60-40. Sometimes it'll be 80-20. Like this weekend, I have to go to a funeral, and my husband, Seth, will be holding all the cards for 2 days, right? And so that's the dynamic nature of this. Watching our toddler, that card we redeal every hour, because neither one of us can handle Anna for more than an hour. And so we go back and forth. But the beauty of the ownership mindset is I'm not getting a text from Seth when he's watching Anna that says, does Anna need to eat lunch? Right. I mean, that is not happening in our household anymore. We know what's happening. We are aware of the hours we're watching her. We've talked about it in advance. We know where she has to be, what has to happen. And that gains so much hours back for not only not only just your baseline mental health, because somebody else has your back, but your baseline mental health, because you can focus on what I call in Fair Play, the three things that I call it the happiness trio, the things that were reported to me in thousands of data points that make people the happiest, where they want to spend their time and outside of their family obligations. And that is adult friendships. That is self-care, which is, a hot bubble bath, a walk on the beach. And that is what I call also unicorn space, which is the active pursuit of things that make you. Not, necessarily eating a pie. That's self-care for me in the pandemic, but the idea of baking a pie. And so you can only get the unicorn space, the true self-care, and the and the friendship time if you make room,
Yeah.
if you get more efficiency in your home.
So you were talking about how much falls on mothers, right? On the moms. We just went through some cards there together. With Mother's Day around the corner, right? It's coming up. What do you think moms should be asking for this year?
So this is the funny thing about Mother's Day. The funny thing about Mother's Day versus Father's Day was that, and you see this in all the memes, that fathers say, I just want to spend time with my families. And women often say, I just want to spend time alone. I think for me, Mother's Day is very fraught with thinking about what do women really need. And I think what women really need is for us to be a community, to empower all mothers to ask for what we really need. And so the beauty is that we've been able to partner with CVS. And I will say, when we partner with a company, it's very intentional. And the reason why CVS is sort of near and dear to my heart is because it was my playground during the pandemic. Literally, every playground was closed in California. And so I would take Anna into CVS and they were so lovely there. They just let us play. And so I thought that on this other milestone holiday of Mother's Day, it felt like a place that I wanted to partner with because it's a company that is not only female led, but you can get, of course, like the vitamins, the probiotics, the sunscreen.
Yeah.
They have a minute clinic. But the beauty is that it's a company that's starting to help and understand and embrace how important women's wellness is.
Yeah.
And wellness is not something that we talk about. We do say we want to add self-care to our list. And I often used to say, well, thanks for giving me something else to do to add to my pile that I can't get to.
Yeah.
But that's not what self-care means. Self-care means we are literally changing the game for women to recognize that we deserve the permission to be unavailable. We deserve an unencumbered mind. And we deserve true self-care, which to me is how we restore our mental, emotional, social, physical, financial health. And so that's what I'm excited about, to continue to spread that message.
I love that. So you're partnering with them with CVS to really kind of get this idea out there for women and for moms to ask for what they really want, right? So what is the best way for a woman to engage in that conversation with her significant other?
That's a great question. I think that's the question I get most is that I can't even communicate about these things. So what comes first, I think, is the recognition that as women, and I say this a lot, and I say this sincerely, right? As a society, we have learned to treat women's time as if it's infinite, like sand, and we treat men's time as if it's finite, like diamond. And it's the thing that keeps me up at night, and it's the thing that I think that ultimately keeps us quiet and not asking for what we need, which is that we've been taught and conditioned not to value our own time. We know society doesn't value our time. Women enter a male profession, the salaries go down. Yep. We hear people saying breastfeeding is free. Which is definitely not if you actually valued women's time. But in the home, these what I call toxic time messages that hold us back from asking for what we need, like I'm a better multitasker, not true. And the time it takes me to tell him, her, they what to do, I should do it myself, not true. I do more of the home stuff because my partner makes more money than me, or my job is more flexible. These are all ways to continue to devalue our own time. So the first thing I would say that I'd love people to do on our journey, because you will hear practical tips. We are doing a beautiful event where we're going to talk about all those different types of aspects of your mental health, your financial health, your emotional health, your gender division of labor health, your relationship health, all of these types of health we're going to be talking about and unpacking how to start to make wellness a practice. Mm-hmm. And that includes how we communicate, which we will be talking about. For me here, what I want to say is that we cannot communicate what we don't believe. Yeah. And so why we're talking again is because I'm here to say to women, you have a permission to be unavailable from your roles as a partner, a parent, and a professional. Yeah. You deserve that permission. You deserve sustained attention for things that you love. Mm-hmm. That's the gift I'm giving you. I'm giving you on Mother's Day. You deserve sustained, uninterrupted attention for things that you love. Your adult friendships, your unicorn space, your self-care. Yeah. And that's what I want women to ask for. But really it's about this idea of being able to have time choice.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what I say is to me, wellness equates to I have choice over how I use my day. So that's what I'm hoping that we can gift women on this Mother's Day.
Yeah. And you mentioned this, the virtual event that you're doing with CVS.
So we're really excited about Hello Sunshine. We've partnered with CVS for this virtual event that's coming up. And all the listeners here hopefully will attend. And so I think they can learn to RSVP through She Speaks.
Yes.
So we will be having this deep dive into what holds women back that we just talked about. But really it's going to be focused on ways to restore our mental, emotional, social, financial, and physical health. And to recognize that this is a journey. This is really a journey. So we'll have the practical tips. Communication is my specialty. But with me, I'm going to have Tabitha Brown. I'm really excited about Nora McKierney.
Awesome.
Nora McKierney, her podcast, Terrible Thanks for Asking, is amazing as well. Liz Hernandez, she's really beautifully unpacks the meaning in words. So she's also going to talk about the words we use in communication. The event that we're talking about, it will be Monday, May 10th. So the day after Mother's Day. And hopefully you will have a good Mother's Day based on this podcast. And it's 12 to 2 p.m. Pacific, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. So I really hope you join us. It's a free virtual event. We're building a community of women focused on wellness. And so I hope to see you there.
Right. It's awesome. And I hope that everyone gets a chance. It's a free event. So if anyone wants to check it out, we will put a link to it in the show notes. So hopefully people can sign up and check it out. So what is next for Fair Play? Because you've got a lot going on.
What's next for Fair Play is continuing to convince the society that an hour holding our children's hand at the pediatrician's office or in the CVS urgent care is as valuable as an hour in the boardroom. And to do that, Fair Play is becoming a political movement. And we have assembled 250 leaders in care in a Care Force Slack. And we are working tirelessly. These are advocates who are working tirelessly to ensure that childcare, that paid leave, that payments to parents are all part of the next version of the Build Back Better plan for our federal government. We are the last developed nation that does not have, along with, I think, Papua New Guinea, that does not have a federal paid leave program. And it is just because we have built the backs, as I said earlier, of societies on the assumption that women can do it all, which we can't. And we have been, and it is harming us mentally, physically, emotionally, financially. So that is really my goal for Fair Play, is to continue in the movement. So I would say I really hope everyone joins us in that movement. You can follow along at Fair Play Life or on our Instagram. You can find the conception, planning, and execution for every card at fairplaylife.com. And you can always find me at Eve Rodsky on Instagram. We answer DMs and we love to hear from you.
Well, Eve, thank you so much for all that you're doing for women. And I love what you're saying in terms of the direction you guys are going, because it is people like you that are going to help change the fabric of how it works in this country for women. So thank you for all that you're doing. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I feel the same way. You are a cultural warrior. And I want to thank you because your team is also has the full ownership mindset. So thank you all thank you, She Speaks, for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure.